I'm Brandon Miller, and you are listening to Coach. This weekly series dives deep into the world of Clifton strengths and how they impact your daily life. Hear from certified strengths coaches on the ins and outs, quirks, and characteristics of all 34 strengths and 4 domains and how they play out in real life. Let's get started. Hello and welcome back to the Strengths Whisperer Season 2, Coach to Coach. I'm here today with Sara Regan of Strengths Now, and we are talking about the strength of Relator. Sara, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Good to be with you.
So I had to pick one of the OCs, original coaches, all the way back from 2013. So Sara is in year 11 of her journey this round of being a Gallup certified strengths coach. And we have picked one of the most common strengths in the whole world. So all kinds of you people listening today, dear listener, you know that this strength is either going to apply to you directly, someone you know and care about, someone you work with. Guaranteed you run into this strength pretty much every single day with people in or around your orbit. It's so common. And so we are going to do our best today to unpack Relator, to give you some depth, some insights, perhaps some new discoveries, and certainly some points of application. So Sara, for the benefit of our listeners, can you tell us a little bit about Strengths Now and what you're up to?
Sure. So Strengths Now is a consulting business. We're based in Boston, Massachusetts, and have been doing this work for, as you said, about 11 years now, and introduced thousands of people to their strengths in that time. We work primarily in biotech and do some work with finance and technology and some higher ed clients as well.
Tell us about any projects that are really exciting right now that you're interested in, that you would say, gosh, this one's been a lot of fun or very fulfilling.
Yeah, sure. Maybe one of the more recent things, just last week, I was on your side of the country doing a kickoff for a 3-day retreat for, it was a global gathering of people at Thermo Fisher Scientific. And so it was the first time that a lot of people were meeting in person, and was able to kick off with a half-day Clifton Strengths workshop. And we had about 100 people, so it was really high energy, lots of fun activities, and lots of excitement, and helpful for them as a way of really connecting to build relationships and build some trust going forward. So that was a recent fun project. Doing some other work here more locally with a global biotech firm where we did an introduction with a new leader assimilation. So new CEO coming into the firm who happened to be a Clifton Strengths fan. And so it was the way for him to be able to really introduce himself to his leadership team. And similarly, we did the kickoff. Day one was introducing themselves through Clifton Strengths. So those are some of the more exciting things recently.
Awesome. Listeners, if you're hearing this today, you're looking for someone to facilitate that kickoff type half day, the beginning of an initiative. I happen to know that Sara is an expert at helping organizations really bring this insight around a strengths-based approach to development, leadership, how employees are engaged in the long term. So in the aggregate of how organizations really think about their human development strategy. But those kickoff events are so important because it will make or break how we connect. And I have had the privilege of seeing Sara in action. So I can say with certainty that you would be getting your money's worth if you contacted her to come and do some work with you. So there you are, strengthsnow.com. If you're any of those industries, but I think Sara can probably stretch into others. So don't feel limited. But if you know biotech, higher ed, finance, large corporate, give her a ring. And now let's talk about Relator. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, friends, because this is big. So this is such a common strength, and I will say personally, one that I have seen at its amazing best, like such a powerful strength when it is in its highest form. And I have seen this strength where, oh my, have to put a warning label on it. I've seen the whole spectrum of how Relator can show up. And so since you are relator at a very strong level, so this is, I think we'd agree, a dominant strength for you. Can you please take us by the hand and tell us about Relator? And you can speak personally, you could speak coaching it. The floor is yours.
I'm going to actually give you an analogy, and you all with Relator can feed us back whether that's a good analogy or not. But I was thinking about this and imagining like two people who have a piece of taffy, and when that piece of taffy is stretched really, really thin, there is this connection point. But I think, in fact, Relator starts with two people who are actually far away from one another, but you kind of point towards that person and then take a step towards them and invite them to do the same. And it's this process of mutually getting to know one another, coming closer, building trust until two people are now standing close to one another, face to face. And this taffy that holds them together is actually really strong and really visible. And so that's my recent thought about Relator. I think the misperception, which you might have cued into, is that oftentimes people think it means that you relate to everybody. But I think it's one at a time. There's this process of becoming closer and taking steps towards one another. But when that bond is set, it's set forever.
That's very good. And you called out the key term that I've always gravitated to with this strength, and it's trust. This strength relies upon, builds it, leans into it, measures it naturally, can tell to what degree can you be within my closest circle, or the one out or the one out or the one out. I've always thought of the concentric circles of a relator, because you can tell who are the lifetime besties, who is that very close in, as close as a child, as close as a spouse or partner, and then how it works out from there. And those degrees really matter, it seems, for how vulnerable I can be, how much I can let you in. But then I've also noted with interest that relators can be very friendly people, and it almost mirrors woo in some ways, because they're friendly, but as you said, it's because I'm looking at you, right? I'm being friendly to you. And so it feels like you're taking a genuine interest in me. So where woo might be able to do that with four people, like I can make all four of you feel that way. Relators seem to have the gift to just make you feel like you're the only person in the room.
And I would say that it's not even to make you feel, you actually are the only person in the room. When that's happening, it's that Relator, I think, is seeking that level of connection and making space for you. So I think that's part of why I think it comes across as very genuine, authentic, because it truly is.
That's amazing. Let's get into the genuine and authenticity of a relator, because I think what it's known for is what you see is what you get. Relators seem to have an authenticity to them. And I have met relators who, without apology, this is me, and this is what I'm going to be. And I don't try to present myself as something I'm not. I will find, if I can, points where we relate. That's the term, right? I'd love to find that. However, I'm not going to change mine to match yours. Mine will be authentic to me. Yours will be authentic to you. And let's see, because I've also noted, and this will be interesting for you to help us on, if a relator doesn't have that, they're comfortable with, okay, it's nice meeting you, and then off they go. And it's very simple. It seems very simple for them to do that, because it's that knowing of how much I'm bringing you in, and then where we land together.
I think that's true. I would say when I think of it personally and professionally, I think it maybe shows up a little differently. When I know it is my job to relate and to build trust and put somebody at ease, I feel like I'm all in. When it's maybe more voluntary about selectively who are those people to come into the inner circle, who do I want to take a step closer towards, then I feel like I use more discretion. But I think in a work situation in coaching, I think it can actually form a relationship quickly. There's something that I think it's the relator behind this. But for example, if I'm doing focus groups or a 360 and I need to go in there and find out what's really going on, and I have like a limited amount of time to be able to build that trust and have somebody really kind of like spill it, tell me what's really going on, people end up in a quick amount of time being able to be very real back with me. And I think they feel that I will be a keeper of that important information that they've shared with me. And if I've said something like, this is going to be anonymous, they know that it's going to be anonymous. And I've even said to people, as I'm synthesizing this report and pulling this information together, if I feel like there's going to be something that's going to identify you particularly, I'm going to double back. I'm going to ask you. And if you're not comfortable with it, I'm going to pull it. So I do feel like there's a way that when in a professional working relationship, if it's something that we need to get off the ground quickly or we have that limited amount of time, I am going to find the way to bring that person close quickly. And hopefully in a way that they feel is genuine.
I love that. And the strength of that coming through, where you're putting people at ease. You're helping them to believe you, trust you, that what you say is what you will do and that you will take the extra care to circle back. That's a powerful description of that strength in action. One of the resources that we've provided for our listeners this season is we call it How to Be a Good Teammate to Me. And this particular resource is one that describes something you're probably very familiar with, the contributions and needs of each of the strengths. And then it gives the exercise that some of us have learned to use really well, the best of me, and how that can really support a team member to team member, manager to report, however it is applied. And I wonder if you'd listen to some of these that we've listed for Relator, and maybe if there's some we would add. Because I look at any time a list is made of a strength, and I always think, gosh, there's so much more depth to that. And then the need side is something very interesting on this strength. So here are some contributions. Serve those they know, holds and honors trust carefully. I think you really just described that. Loyalty, authentic and genuine, a few close, deep friendships, honest, straightforward. Is there anything on that list we missed, meaning they got it wrong?
I like and appreciate and agree with all of that. In terms of other contributions, I don't know how this fits, but it's I think there's a capacity to almost kind of do the hard stuff because of this, that I think Relator can tolerate the maybe discomfort or the difficulties. I mean, I find those in coaching relationships and people are experiencing great difficulty, or there's some hard medicine to swallow. I feel like Relator can be a strength that can help deliver that in a way that people are better able to hear because there's a sense of kind of safety built into the relationship.
Excellent. So ability to do the hard stuff, would that even just include just difficult conversations?
I think difficult conversations, difficult feedback, similar to what I said before when people need to actually share back something honestly that I might be gathering for a climate survey or focus group. So there's that part, but then it's the hearing it. Somebody has to be on the receiving end of that and being the translator and being able to make sure that people are going to kind of stay intact and know they have a person who's going to walk this journey with them. And there's the trust in that piece, and that the difficult things they might be hearing are in the context of genuinely wanting to help and believing that there will be a pathway forward. We're going to figure this out. I'm going to walk in this journey with you. And I think people feel that sense of support.
Excellent. Contributions of Relators. So listeners, today, if you want to get your own copy of this, email Brandon at 34strong.com. And we have How to Be a Good Teammate to Me. Let's talk about needs. So I'll give you the list. You could see which are all that you might connect with and what we missed. Authenticity. We need honesty, patience while getting comfortable to be vulnerable, deep, intimate conversations and relationship with a select few, to be seen, and others who will risk vulnerability.
I like the last piece. I hadn't thought of that one recently, but others being willing to risk vulnerability. And I think relators can help in a coaching context and workshop context to be able to make it more comfortable for somebody to take those risks. So I like that piece. Thinking of this, the group I mentioned most recently in California, one of the activities we do is to break down into common theme groups. So there was a group of relators, there's a group of woo, there's a group of achievers. I think we had 9 different groups. And one of the things that was interesting for them is that the group of relators formed smaller subgroups. So instead of their group of 10, they were, groups of 3 and 4, and they all worked on the questions and then consolidated. So I think and it was just right there. We're living, we're breathing, we're seeing relators in action. None of the other groups did that. Woo had brought pom-poms and they got up on stage and did a cheer, and relators did their thing. They worked in a smaller group and they kind of worked collaboratively in that way. So I think some of the other tips, and this group was 54% of the group had relator in their top 5. It was the most dominant strength for the team. So we had some conversations about this because they are a global team. They're spread out, they don't meet in person very often. And so some of the things that they talked about, what they need is people keeping their video on. Like, that matters to Relator. Like, give me something. I just feel a little more connected when I can see the nonverbals. They talked about the idea of when there's a large meeting, if there are ways to break it into smaller groups of people who can work on something and then feed back to the larger group. They talked about the need for these really meaningful one-on-one interactions. And nobody likes to add another meeting to the list of many things to do during the week. But, a 10-minute, 5-minute coffee connect with a new person to be able to say, these are some key people that it's going to be important for you to get to know, and to set the expectation of, like, you know what, find some time one-on-one, grab a coffee, have a Zoom call where it's really going to, the kickoff is about, let me get to know who you are. And that's outside of work and what your projects are and where, but tell me about your family, tell me about your dog, tell me about what's going on. That it feels like Relator needs a spark. It needs something that kind of sets it in motion. And when that happens, then it becomes very natural. But I think it's often looking for that initial kickoff. And so when managers can say, this is part of what I want you to do, there's 3 key people, I need you to invest in these relationships, I'm going to ask you to set up some one-on-ones, those things can help to kind of kickstart, I think, what Relator needs.
In thinking about the place where Relator is at its best. And I like how you differentiated earlier when I am required to make those connections versus discretionary, right? So the difference between being at a work function or being at a PTA meeting, right? So here I need to be this version of a Relator that satisfies my role as a leader or a manager or even a member of a team, as opposed to when I get to decide who, how, what I connect in the work context specifically. I've had occasion where I have coached people with high Relator where trust has been broken, where there has been something that has pulled them back into a deeper level of privacy, a deeper level of protection. And in one case, I was speaking to a leader who was in an executive role. And in this role, the leader next door was a report, but the leader next door had done something to the leader. And so this leader said, yeah, that person over there, they're dead to me. And actually used it, for those of you watching, used the little 2-finger scissor motion, like they're dead to me. And I had to look at this leader and go, the leader next door can't be dead to you. They're next door. And they report to you and they have a division under them of people. This isn't going to work. We're going to have to find a different route than scissor cutting them. We're going to need a better path here. It started a pathway toward forgiveness, acceptance, understanding, and interestingly, maturity. around some level of magnanimity, meaning you're the leader. It's possible you're going to get offended by people. It's possible sometimes they'll do it on purpose and sometimes incidental, but it's going to happen. And it took time. It took time and it took care for that leader to decide, okay, yes, I do need to take a different tact here because I'm not just impacting this leader, I'm impacting a division. I'm impacting more than this place because of my offense here with this particular person, which happened to be real. It wasn't imagined. It was a real thing that had occurred between them. And so, I imagine in your travels with all these organizations, you've seen that space where a relator can get turned off. And I know today we're isolating a strength. I know there's more dynamics at work. But curious in your journey when you're really helping to bring out the best in a leader, even despite the obstacles, even despite where you're helping them grow and develop that relator to where they're getting a real strength from it, a real level of excellence.
I have seen what you're describing, that I think when trust is broken for many people, it's difficult, but I think it's especially difficult for high relator. And I think it's one of the gifts of Clifton's strengths is to be able to see that, to kind of step back and realize, yeah, it's me. It's actually this relator strength as well, because it helps people to think accept that feedback and their part in it, kind of own that. And so at its, the shadow side, it can be a little cliquish, it can be aloof, it can be shut off. And so I have worked with people in those situations, and also I've started to do, I call it critical partners coaching, where it's two people within the organization. So maybe it's that person behind door one who sits next to person behind door two, and it's evident that something's gotten off track. And to sit together and really map out top 10, bottom five, and to see where some of this rub may be coming from, and that has been helpful, I think, as a way of deconstructing what might be going on. It becomes a little less personal, and people can maybe be able to enter into that conversation a little bit. So it's something I recommend. It's jumping into the hornet's nest with two people who obviously have had difficulty, but I feel like there's a way in which Relator helps people to have that hard conversation too, but sometimes it's the building awareness of how it certainly can get in the way.
Yeah. Yeah. And early on, I think you'll remember the raw immature reference to Clifton Strengths and how the mature version almost always seemed to have an others orientation and a level of understanding, a level of, grace, if you will, a level of grace for people are going to do things that make them people. And, it is the job of leadership to know how to extend grace and move past. And then the raw version. So if I were to switch you to the other side of the pendulum, so emerging leaders, people coming up the levels, people that are earlier in career, the 20s and the early 30s into, pre-40, these two generations emerging are so important to us, right? So we're needing them to be now our future of leaders, and we're developing, and they're different. They have different ways they've received information their whole life, different ways that they've connected with their world, and this strength still persists as a dominant strength for them. I see it a lot in these groups. And curious, if you were talking to a manager or a leader today, and it's okay, you got a team with a lot of this strength. Here's some things you're going to need to do to help cultivate that out of your emerging leaders.
I think the making the space for the one-on-one time, trying to keep that sacred is really important,
I
when
just have to say, I love that you said that. That's a big one. I think the art of the one-to-one, right? The art, the necessity.
yes, yes, and keeping that sacred. And things come up, but, I've heard situations like, well, yeah, we have a standing meeting every other week, but we haven't had it for 6 months because my manager's canceled.
Oh, could you just say something really quick on that? How does a relator feel when someone sets a meeting and cancels on you?
I think if it's habitual, it starts to probably add up to, I'm not sure that this person really cares about me or my time.
So I just want to pause there with what Sara just said and really encourage all of us who are listening today who have the responsibility to meet with people who report to us. And you were very kind with how you said that because I've heard a version of what you just said in all different colorful languages. And I just feel like, oh my gosh, the sacredness of the one-to-one, the protection of if I habitually or any level of frequency communicate to this person, you're not valuable enough for me to keep the time I set for us to talk. I said it and I'm just running right through it. And just how deflating that is. How much it just feels like, what's the point? Am I just a checkbox on your list? And some weeks you get to me and some weeks you don't. So sorry, that one I've heard more times than I can count. We're following up on a climate survey, right? We're getting the engagement and figuring out what's going on. And it's, here you go. It's magic. Talk to your people and do it in a way where you can really hear them. So please continue the one-to-one.
Absolutely. Yes. And I think it's a little bit more about quality over quantity. I mean, you want to keep that meeting if it's set, but it doesn't have to be, an hour every week. They can be smaller check-ins, but I think it's that having that human connection. I think the other thing is be prepared to be a little more vulnerable, perhaps with your folks high in Relator. They can handle it. They can welcome it. You can trust them. It will in turn allow them to feel like this is a safe space where I can also be vulnerable. I love all of the work happening right now around psychological safety on teams. And I know that it does not happen unless it's really role modeled by the leader because they signal it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to push back. It's okay to disagree. And if they're not actively fostering that environment, we know that innovation really shuts down and people are not as engaged. So I think leaders themselves then have to be a little bit more comfortable saying, you know what, I really need your help on this, or I'm not so sure, or I and to be really honest and genuine of I'm uncertain and I'm looking for opinion, or you can actually disagree with me. I feel strongly about it, but I actually want to hear differing sides to this. So I think it's being perhaps a little bit more vulnerable than they're used to.
I kind of want to say one point on that one. As a person who I've had many up and comers who are relators, and you're always careful as a leader not to give too much personal insight, right? You have a level of trust there, but I want to just underscore what Sara just said because to the extent that I've experienced giving a bit more insight into the journey, into the reality, into the mistakes, the place where had to learn some things the hard way, difficult times, even sharing when I've had my own challenges in some mental health aspect and being honest about, yeah, I've had some anxiety or I've had some challenge here. That has not necessarily, I don't want to use the word empowered, but I think it provides some humanness to the reality of just, hey, this isn't, it's not a point of weakness to acknowledge when you're struggling. It's okay to admit you have failed in some ways. You didn't get where you are without moving through failure. We all have experienced that, but you're saying it so well. It's giving permission, right? Permission to say, okay, I can also be honest then. I can also get here because it seems to me relators they crave authentic communication. And yet you've raised your teenagers. I'm almost done with my teenagers, so I'll take it in the home place. It was once said to me that it's not a question of if your teenagers lie, it's how often and if they're good at it. And when somebody unpacks, why do teens lie? They don't want to get in trouble. They don't want to, they're avoiding consequence. And so when they move into the business realm, into their 20s, 30s, guess what? That proclivity to be less than honest to get out of things can still exist. And yet a relator, when they are in a space that's safe, you'll get the truth. You'll actually have authentic, candid conversation. If there is a belief, this isn't going to be punitive afterward. We're growing together. And it's incredible to watch the development elevate. So thank you on that. I'll let you continue.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that one of the things I like about Relator, I like to say about Relator is we like to keep it real. And we can sniff out when people are not being real, when they're putting up the wall.
Say that again. Say it again. We can sniff out when we're not being real. Oh gosh, listener, that nugget happened at 31 minutes, and I hope you made it this far because that is so true of this particular strength. I mean, it can catch inauthenticity like that very quickly. Oh gosh, keep going.
Well, and I think as a relator, it just seems there's almost like it's silly. Like, of course, we're all real. We're all human. We all make mistakes. We're, rich people who are very complex. And when people really withhold a lot of that or try to put up the veneer, I think relators just think like, what's going on there? Like, what's the big deal? What are they hiding? So I think that's where it's not always that we need people to invite us in. I think there's the reciprocity built into Relator. We're expecting that other people will show up in that same way to some degree.
That's awesome. Sara, thank you so much for joining us today, bringing your rich expertise in the Clifton Strengths realm. And listeners, again, strengthsnow.com. Just want to underscore, Sara is a pro. She has been doing this for well over a decade. When she describes those half days, those strengths interventions, the solutions, the architecture of a full and complete rebuild or upgrade of your human development systems, processes, how you think about growing and developing your leaders, your employee experience, well-being, employee engagement, please do reach out to her, strengthsnow.com. If you are interested in the resource, How to Be a Great Team Member to Me, it is Brandon at 34strong.com, and we will make sure that you get your copy straight away. Sara, thank you again for joining us today. This has been very, very strong, great insights. And next season, interestingly enough, I get to start talking about this because I'm almost through all 34 strengths in this season 2 of Strengths Whisper. But next season, we're going to unpack it with another guest, and we're going to start to get into the uniqueness of the strength to strength combinations. So how your relator is going to connect to your other strengths and what makes that a unique version of Relator as opposed to another guest and their version. So we'll get to explore just some of the cool ways that these shape and shift based upon who we are as people and certainly how our strengths mix comes together. So with that, dear listeners, thank you for joining us on another episode. We look forward to seeing you again on the Strengths Whisper, Coach to Coach.
Thank you for tuning in to the Strengths Whisperer Coach to Coach. Please feel free to reach out to Brandon to partner with 34 Strong for collaboration opportunities to serve your employees or clients together. If you are a strengths coach, lead a strengths-based team, or are a fan of strength, we invite you to receive our complimentary resource, How to Be a Good Teammate to Me, Understanding My Contributions and Needs. Email Brandon_Miller at 34strong.com to connect, and he will gladly share this resource that will continue to unlock the power of strength.